The princess's fertility skin flashed red, and every noble in the chamber turned away from her. I stood 20 feet below the royal dais with a diagnostic tablet warming my palm, watching Princess Seralyth Vael become politically worthless in less than 3 seconds. A crystalline tone rang through the vaulted chamber. Above us, suspended holograms rotated in pale gold. Genetic chains, reproductive markers, the ancient crest of House Vael. Then one word burned across them. Barren. Seralyth remained perfectly still. Her pearl-teal skin usually carried thin golden lines of bioluminescence along her throat and collarbones. I had noticed them when she entered. Now those lines dimmed until they looked like dying embers beneath glass. Confirm, ordered the high geneticist. The medical platform hummed under her bare feet. Sterile air smelled faintly of ozone and antiseptic resin. A second scan passed over her tall frame in sheets of violet light, making her silver lavender hair shine almost white. Confirmed, the machine answered. Probability of viable royal conception, 0.0. A murmur moved through the nobles like fabric dragged over stone. I tightened my grip on the tablet. My name was Ethan Cole, xenobiological systems engineer for the Terran delegation, which meant I was supposed to keep Earth equipment compatible with Vaelorian technology and otherwise stay invisible. Today, invisible sounded excellent. Seralyth descended from the platform. Nobody offered a hand. That bothered me more than the diagnosis. 10 minutes earlier, those same people had bowed so deeply their ceremonial chains touched the floor. Now they created a clean circle around her, as though infertility were contagious. Princess Seralyth, the Chancellor said, his voice carefully empty. Under the continuity laws, your eligibility as primary heir is suspended effective immediately. Her amber eyes lifted toward him. 2 concentric pupils contracted beneath the harsh white light. Suspended, pending formal removal. The golden glow beneath her skin flickered once. How merciful. No one laughed. Her fingers moved to the narrow crown above her brow. For half a second, I thought she would throw it at him. Instead, she straightened it. That tiny movement landed harder than shouting would have. Is there anything else? She asked. The high geneticist lowered his gaze. No, Your Highness. She stepped down from the dais. Her boots clicked against black crystal, slow, precise, controlled. Then my tablet vibrated. Once. Twice. I glanced down. The Vaelorian scan had automatically mirrored its raw telemetry into the Terran compatibility system I was monitoring. Most of it meant nothing without proper analysis. Hormonal pathways, cellular resonance, gamete viability, endocrine response, all marked inactive, all consistent with the verdict hanging above us. Almost all. One line was pulsing blue. I stopped breathing for a beat. Receptor pathway V17, dormant, not absent. I enlarged it with my thumb. The tablet glass felt slick beneath my suddenly damp fingers. Dormant wasn't sterile. Dormant meant something existed but wasn't activating. I checked the machine's conclusion again. Barren. Then the raw reading. Dormant. A shadow crossed the screen. I looked up. Seralyth had stopped directly in front of me. Up close, she was nearly a head taller, and I could hear the faint crystalline ornaments in her hair clicking together. Her gaze dropped to my tablet. Human, she said quietly. Why are you looking at me like that? Behind her, attendants were already removing her royal insignia from the medical platform. Metal whispered against crystal. I should have locked the screen. I should have remembered that I was an engineer standing in the middle of an alien succession ceremony. Instead, I looked at the woman an empire had just declared incapable of continuing its bloodline, then back at the impossible blue signal still pulsing beneath my thumb. Because, I said, I think your machine just answered the wrong question. Seralyth's hand closed over my tablet before the chamber guards could see what was glowing on it. Her fingers were cool against mine, the smooth pads of them pressing hard enough to lock the screen beneath her palm. Around us, the royal chamber had begun to empty. Boots clicked across black crystal, ceremonial fabric whispered through the sterile air, and somewhere behind the dais a medical scanner powered down with a descending electronic hum. You will explain that sentence, she said. Privately. She released the tablet and walked toward a narrow side passage without checking whether I followed. I followed. 2 royal guards moved after us. Seralyth stopped. Stay. One guard hesitated. Your Highness, protocol. I still possess enough of my title to close a door. The golden lines beneath her throat brightened sharply. The guards bowed. That was my first lesson in Vaelorian anger. It glowed. The door sealed behind us with a pneumatic hiss. The consultation room beyond was barely 15 feet wide, lined with translucent medical panels and polished silver instruments. Blue light washed across Seralyth's pearl-teal skin. The air was colder here, maybe 60 degrees, and smelled of disinfectant and hot circuitry. She turned on me. Show me. I set the tablet on the examination counter, but kept my hand over it. I need to be careful about what I say. You were not careful 30 seconds ago. Fair point. I unlocked the screen. Your physicians diagnosed the result. I'm questioning the definition. Her double-ringed pupils narrowed. Do humans make a habit of insulting alien medicine? Mostly we make a habit of asking annoying questions. I noticed. I pulled up the reproductive model, but I deliberately did not hunt for another clue. The evidence was already there. Your medical system expects a reproductive pathway to activate under specific Vaelorian biological conditions. It didn't activate, so the system labeled you barren. Because I am. That's the conclusion. I tapped the blue marker. Not necessarily the fact. She stared at it without moving. The room's ventilation whispered overhead. What is the difference? A dead engine and an engine without an ignition signal both look quiet. I turned the tablet toward her. An engineer doesn't call them the same problem. Her gaze snapped to mine. I am not an engine. Exactly. That stopped her. I took my hand away from the screen. Which is why I'm not going to stand here and pretend a machine gets to define you. The door suddenly opened. The high geneticist entered with 2 attendants, his white ceremonial coat reflecting the blue light. Engineer Cole, surrender the Terran copy of Her Highness's medical telemetry. I picked up the tablet. I can't do that. His expression hardened. Those readings belong to the Crown. They came through Terran equipment under diplomatic medical sharing rules. I need patient authorization before releasing raw biological data. The princess is property of the Royal Continuity Program. The words left his mouth with the casual precision of someone stating atmospheric pressure. I looked at Seralyth. She had gone motionless. Then she reached up and removed the narrow crown from her head. Carefully, quietly, she placed it on the silver counter between us. The metal made a small, clean sound. Leave, she told the high geneticist. Your Highness, now. Golden light spread beneath her collarbones. The attendants backed away first. The geneticist followed, and the door sealed again. Seralyth kept looking at the crown instead of me. You misunderstand what you are interfering with, Ethan Cole. It was the first time she had used my name. Then explain it. For 400 years, every woman of House Vael who failed this test was removed from succession. Every one. She finally faced me. There is no appeal. There is no second interpretation. There is certainly no human engineer arriving from Earth and announcing that generations of Vaelorian medicine asked the wrong question. I didn't announce anything. You almost did. Then tell me to erase it. I held out the tablet. Its screen cast blue light between us. Say the word. I delete my copy, walk back to the Terran wing, and never mention this again. Her eyes dropped to my thumb hovering above the deletion command. Seconds passed. The ventilation fan clicked softly. Seralyth reached toward the tablet, then stopped an inch from it. You pity me. No, everyone does now. I think everyone decided what you are worth based on whether you can produce an heir. My thumb remained over the command. I think that's a terrible way to measure a person. The faint light under her skin returned, not gold this time, but something softer, almost amber. She pulled her hand back. And if your interpretation is wrong, then you're still you. Her jaw tightened. She turned toward the door. Do not try to fix me, human. I wasn't planning to. She paused. I lowered the tablet, but did not erase the data. I'm planning to find out whether you were ever broken. Seralyth stood absolutely still. Then she touched the door control, looked back over her shoulder, and made the first decision that neither her physicians nor her crown had made for her. You have 48 hours, Ethan Cole. After that, you erase everything. The decontamination doors slammed shut just as Seralyth's hand disappeared behind a wall of violet light. I hit the emergency panel with my palm. Seralyth. Static crackled through the speaker. Then her voice came back, clipped and controlled. I am here. 6 hours remained on the medical hold I had placed against her exile, and we were supposed to spend them testing whether the Vaelorian diagnostic platform had misclassified her reproductive biology. Instead, A containment alarm had divided the laboratory in half. Red symbols pulsed across the glass. The ventilation system roared overhead, pushing air cold enough to sting my face, carrying the sharp smell of ozone from an overloaded sterilization coil. Cross-species bioelectric variants, the computer announced. Temporary isolation required. That's convenient, I muttered. Do humans insult machines when trapped by them? Seralyth asked through the glass. Only the ones that deserve it. A faint amber pulse moved beneath the skin at her throat. I was beginning to recognize that one. Almost amusement. Almost. Can you open your side? She asked. I pulled the maintenance cover from the wall. Warm metal scraped my knuckles. Working on it. The Palace Laboratory had been designed for Vaelorian genetic medicine, not Terran engineering improvisation. I traced the containment circuit until I found the manual bridge, then removed my insulated wristband and wrapped it around 2 hot contacts. Blue sparks snapped. The door remained closed, but the alarm dropped from red to yellow. You deliberately shorted. Royal medical equipment. Temporarily persuaded it. That distinction sounds very human. I smiled despite myself. You're learning. I rerouted the scanner through my Terran tablet and initiated a basic environmental calibration. The machine needed 2 biological references before it would release us. Mine was already stored from embassy clearance. Seralyth placed her palm against the sensor on her side. White light traveled from her fingertips to her wrist. The scanner hummed, then stopped. A different tone sounded. Not an alarm. 3 ascending notes. I froze. Seralyth heard the silence from me before she saw the screen. Ethan. I looked down. Her V17 receptor pathway, the same one labeled dormant during the succession examination, had changed state. Not dramatically. Not enough to prove anything about fertility, but enough to make my engineering brain refuse coincidence. Dormant had become responsive. What did it find? She asked. I didn't answer immediately. I checked the calibration settings. Then again, the room smelled suddenly hotter as the sterilization coil cycled, though the temperature display still read 61 degrees. Ethan. I turned the tablet toward the glass. Your receptor pathway activated. Her eyes moved across the numbers. Because of the scanner? No, the containment field? No, her gaze lifted slowly. Then what changed? I looked at the 2 biological reference icons displayed side by side. Vaelorian. Human. Me. The words sat between us. Seralyth stepped away from the glass. The golden lines beneath her collarbones brightened, then dimmed. Explain. The system sampled both of us when it calibrated the room. Your dormant pathway responded after it registered Terran biological markers. That is impossible. I'd really like that sentence banned from laboratories. Ethan, I'm not saying this means you can conceive with a human. I kept my voice level. One receptor response is not proof of compatibility, fertility, or anything else. But it means your biology can react to something your physicians never included in their model. She stared at the display again. I could hear her breathing through the speaker now, slower than before. Erase it. My hand stopped above the controls. What? Erase this reading. Seralyth. If the Continuity Council sees it, I stop being a discarded princess and become a biological resource. That shut me up. She stepped closer to the glass until her reflection overlapped mine. For 20 years they measured my worth by what my body could produce. I will not allow a human discovery to give them a new reason to own it. I looked at the data, then at her. I understood the choice before she asked for it. My thumb pressed delete. The reading vanished from the royal system. I disconnected the palace network, saved an encrypted copy locally, and forced the containment lock open. The violet barrier dissolved with a hiss of cold air. Seralyth stepped through. We stood less than 3 feet apart, surrounded by cooling machinery and fading yellow light. You destroyed evidence that might restore my claim, she said. It was your evidence. Her gaze stayed on me. And if I choose to continue? I handed her the tablet. Then nobody studies you without your permission, including me. Her fingers closed around it. This time she did not give it back. The council believes I leave for Ilion in 6 hours. I know. Seralyth touched the crown still resting on her head, then removed it and placed it beside the disconnected scanner. Let them believe it. She turned toward me, the amber light beneath her skin steady now. From this moment forward, Ethan Cole, whatever we learn about what happens between human biology and mind belongs to us first. The Continuity Council arrived before Seralyth had time to put her crown back on. The laboratory doors opened with a hard metallic hiss, spilling white corridor light across the violet floor, and 6 officials entered behind the high geneticist. Their silver robes whispered against the crystal tiles. I could smell sterilizing resin on them before the door sealed. Seralyth stood beside me with her crown still resting near the disconnected scanner. My tablet was in her hand. The high geneticist looked from the dead network indicator to the dismantled containment panel. Engineer Cole, restore the laboratory archive. No, his jaw tightened. That was not a request. Good. My answer still works. 2 security officers stepped forward. Seralyth moved between them and me. No announcement. No dramatic gesture. Just one measured step that changed the geometry of the room. He is operating under my authorization, she said. The Chancellor entered last. His eyes settled on Seralyth. Your medical authority ended when the continuity judgment was issued. My authority over my own body did not. Silence followed. Even the ventilation seemed loud. The Chancellor extended one hand toward me. The Terran device. I folded my arms. Patient data requires patient consent. She is not your patient. Then you have even less reason to demand it from me. The Chancellor's gaze hardened. Engineer Cole, you have interfered with a lawful transfer, disabled royal medical equipment, and concealed biological information concerning the imperial bloodline. Your diplomatic status can be challenged before sunset. Seralyth looked at me. Her fingers tightened around my tablet. Give it to them. I turned toward her. No, Ethan. You told me what happens if they see that reading. The high geneticist took a step closer. Reading? Seralyth's amber eyes flashed toward him. Too late. The word was loose in the room. The Chancellor lifted his chin. There is new reproductive data. There is private medical data, I said. You will surrender it. Not without her permission. You would sacrifice your position for a woman who cannot provide you, your government, or this empire with anything? That did it. I crossed the space between us and took my Terran identification badge from my jacket. The metal edge felt cold against my fingers. I placed it on the scanner table. You keep talking about her like she's equipment with a failed output. The Chancellor glanced at the badge. Be careful, human. I am. I looked at Seralyth. Under the clinical light, the golden lines along her throat had gone completely still. She's a person before she's a princess. Nobody moved. Before she's an heir. Before she's fertile or infertile. Before whatever that scanner says she can give you. My voice sounded strangely small inside the enormous laboratory. If respecting that costs me my assignment, take the badge. The Chancellor picked it up. A soft electronic chirp confirmed the transfer. My embassy access disappeared from the wall display. Just like that, months of work and the protection attached to it were gone. Effective immediately, he said. Your authorization inside the Royal Medical Complex is revoked. Security moved toward me. Seralyth raised one hand. Stop. They stopped. The Chancellor turned. You no longer command this facility. No. She walked to the scanner, lifted her crown, and studied its polished surface. Then she set it down again. But I command myself. She handed me the tablet. The Chancellor's face changed by barely a fraction. Seralyth, you wanted his data because you believe it might make me useful again. Her voice remained quiet. Yet he was willing to destroy it because I asked. She stepped beside me. Her shoulder nearly touched mine. Which of you, Chancellor, is treating me like royalty? No one answered. Security finally escorted me into the corridor. The doors closed between us with a heavy thud. I had made it perhaps 30 feet when they opened again. Footsteps followed. Seralyth emerged alone, carrying neither crown nor royal insignia. Princess, one guard called. She kept walking. When she reached me, she placed my tablet against my chest. Her fingers lingered there for 1 second. You lost your position. Looks that way. For someone who may still be barren. That wasn't part of the calculation. She studied my face beneath the cold corridor lights. Then the amber glow beneath her skin strengthened until I could see its reflection on the tablet between us. Good, she said, because I have decided something too. She turned toward the elevators instead of the royal apartments. If we learn the truth, Ethan Cole, we do it together. Seralyth took me somewhere no Vaelorian physician had bothered to look in 300 years. The elevator dropped beneath the palace medical levels with a vibration I could feel through my boots, carrying us past polished laboratories into older foundations where the walls changed from black crystal to rough silver stone. My diplomatic access was gone, but Seralyth pressed her palm against each royal seal herself. One by one, the doors opened. Cold air rolled through them, smelling of mineral dust and ancient insulation. Where are we? I asked. The first genetic archive. I thought the Continuity Council controlled all reproductive records. They control the records they consider useful. Her amber eyes caught the dim blue emergency strips along the floor. These were abandoned when the modern fertility protocols were standardized. The final door resisted. Seralyth removed a thin ceremonial pin from her silver lavender hair and pushed it into a recessed mechanical release. I stared at her. Princess and lockpick. Do not make me regret bringing you. The door groaned open. Wouldn't dream of it. Inside, thousands of translucent storage columns rose nearly 30 feet toward a dark ceiling. Dust softened their surfaces. Somewhere beneath the floor, pumps beat with a slow mechanical rhythm, and the temperature couldn't have been above 55 degrees. Seralyth hugged her arms briefly against herself. I took off my jacket and offered it. She looked at the jacket, then at me. Humans require more insulation than Vaelorians. And yet you're the one shivering. I am not shivering. A faint tremor moved through her fingers. I held the jacket closer. She took it without another word. The sleeves ended several inches above her wrists. I tried not to smile. She noticed anyway. Not one word, Ethan Cole. We reached the central archive terminal. I connected my tablet directly to its physical port, keeping the system isolated from the palace network. No secret revelation appeared. No convenient answer waited for us. Just centuries of reproductive models written in obsolete notation. So we worked. Seralyth translated old Vaelorian terminology while I rebuilt the biological pathways as engineering logic. Hours passed. Dust collected on my fingertips. My coffee went cold beside the console. She corrected my pronunciation 6 times. I corrected her assumption that Terran genetic compatibility could be modeled as a simple male-female signal twice. On the 7th hour, the pattern finally stopped looking like noise. I projected 2 reproductive models into the air. The modern Vaelorian pathway was short and rigid, dependent on a narrow set of matching genetic triggers. The ancient model was wider. Adaptive. Look at the activation stage, I said. Seralyth leaned closer. Pale equations reflected across her face. It requires an external compatibility response. Not exactly. It allows one. I expanded the model. Your ancestors had a secondary pathway. If the primary reproductive signal failed, the receptor system could respond to sufficiently different compatible biology. Her eyes moved to V17. The pathway that reacted to you. Yes. She slowly removed my jacket and placed it across the chair. Then why does modern medicine classify it as irrelevant? I brought the contemporary model beside the ancient one. Because your people bred the variation out. The archive showed the change across generations. Royal pairings selected for narrower and narrower genetic similarity until the secondary mechanism stopped activating within the imperial bloodlines. Your physicians weren't lying, I said. Under the conditions they test, you are infertile. Seralyth's face became very still. With Vaelorian males. I hesitated. Based on what we know so far, yes. She turned toward me. The gold beneath her collarbones pulsed once. But not necessarily with you. The pumps thudded beneath our feet. I could hear my own heartbeat between them. We are nowhere near proving that. I know. And I won't turn you into an experiment. I know that too. She stepped to the console and placed her palm on the authorization plate. The archive asked whether the dormant reproductive pathway should be reopened for comparative study. Seralyth looked at me before answering. For her entire life, other people had chosen the tests, the treatments, the definitions. This time her finger hovered over the control because the decision belonged to her. Then she pressed it. Authorization accepted. I spent 20 years allowing them to prove what my body could not do, she said. Her gaze stayed on mine. Now I want to learn what it can. By the 3rd night underground, Seralyth had learned that human coffee was terrible and that I drank it anyway. She stood beside the archive console with both hands wrapped around a steaming metal cup, watching me recalibrate the comparative scanner. Blue light from the storage columns painted her pearl teal skin in shifting bands, while the old ventilation fans pushed cold air across the room with a low mechanical growl. This tastes burned, she said. That means it's working. As what? Coffee. She took another cautious sip. The golden lines along her throat brightened. I looked down before she caught me smiling. You find my suffering entertaining. A little. Remarkable. Your species has reached the stars without developing manners. We prioritized engines. She laughed once, quiet, surprised, almost crystalline. The sound disappeared among the 30-foot archive columns, and for several seconds neither of us touched the work. Then the scanner chimed. Seralyth set down the cup. We had spent 2 days testing the dormant V17 pathway without reproductive procedures, using only controlled cellular samples and compatibility simulations. Every step required her authorization. Every result stayed isolated from the Palace network. I held out the consent panel. Next sequence. She pressed her thumb against it. Approved. The scanner projected 2 rotating genetic models between us. Human markers in blue. Vaelorian markers in gold. Where the patterns approached each other, V17 began pulsing. Seralyth watched it without speaking. This wasn't another discovery. We already knew her biology could respond to mine. What mattered now was whether she would continue once the question stopped being theoretical. I shut down the projection. That's enough tonight. The simulation is incomplete. It'll still be incomplete tomorrow. We have limited time. And you haven't slept. She gave me a look capable of stripping paint from a spacecraft. You lost your diplomatic position 48 hours ago and have consumed enough stimulant to restart a dead reactor. That's medically inaccurate. Sit down, Ethan. Somehow I did. She took the chair opposite me. Between us, the scanner's cooling coils clicked softly, releasing the warm smell of metal into the dusty archive air. Seralyth traced one finger along the rim of her cup. A royal union among my people is arranged according to genetic value, she said. Compatibility, inheritance, political stability. Personal preference is considered inefficient. That sounds romantic. Romance is not required. Yeah, I gathered that. Her eyes lifted. If this research proves human compatibility, the council would see you differently. As what? Suitable. I leaned back. That might be the least flattering thing anyone has ever called me. The amber light beneath her collarbones flickered. You misunderstand. No, I understand perfectly. They'd take one look at our biology and decide what we should mean to each other. She tilted her head. Humans do not consider compatibility important? Of course we do. I reached over and switched off the scanner completely. The blue projection vanished, leaving only the dim gold of her skin between us. But compatibility doesn't get a vote. Then what does? We do. Her fingers stopped moving around the cup. Explain. If 2 humans build a life together, the point is supposed to be that they choose each other. Not because a machine approves. Not because a government needs a child. And definitely not because somebody decided one of them becomes valuable only if they can reproduce. Seralyth looked toward the dark scanner. And if there can be no child, then the choice is still real. Silence settled over the archive. The fans turned. Somewhere in the walls, an ancient pump beat once, twice, like something sleeping beneath the palace. Seralyth stood and walked toward me. She stopped close enough that I could see gold reflected around the inner rings of her amber eyes. Her hand lifted toward mine on the console. She hesitated. I left my hand exactly where it was. She closed the final inch herself. Her cool fingers rested across my knuckles. No scanner chimed. No medical display measured the contact. Nothing recorded it. All my life, she said softly, I was taught that union begins with what 2 bodies can produce. Her fingers tightened, slightly around mine. What does it begin with for humans? I turned my hand beneath hers, slowly enough that she could pull away. She didn't. A choice. Seralyth looked down at our joined hands, then reached across the console and powered off the archive's reproductive simulation. The last clinical light disappeared. Then before we learn whether our species can create anything together, she said, meeting my eyes, I want to know whether Ethan Cole would choose Seralyth Vael without needing the answer. The archive doors opened before I could answer Seralyth's question. White security light cut across the dark chamber, swallowing the softer gold beneath her skin, and a dozen royal guards entered between the storage columns. Their boots struck the stone in synchronized beats. Behind them came the Chancellor and the High Geneticist, carrying my confiscated Terran identification badge. Seralyth's fingers slipped from mine, not because she had changed her mind, because every weapon in the room had turned toward me. Engineer Cole, the Chancellor said, Step away from the princess. I stayed beside her. I'm not holding her here. No, Seralyth said. He is not. The Chancellor ignored her. His gaze moved across the powered-down scanner, the 2 coffee cups, then the ancient reproductive models still frozen above the console. Human blue intertwined with Vaelorian gold. He understood enough. You conducted compatibility research on the royal bloodline. I authorized it, Seralyth said. The high geneticist approached the projection. With a human? His voice sharpened on the last word. Seralyth stepped between him and the console. With Ethan, that landed differently. I heard armor shift behind me. The room smelled of dust, hot circuitry, and the bitter coffee Seralyth had abandoned minutes earlier. The Chancellor raised my badge. The continuity laws prohibit genetic contamination of House Vael. Nothing was contaminated, I said. We ran simulations. You established potential reproductive compatibility. I looked at Seralyth. She gave the smallest shake of her head. Don't give them more. The Chancellor turned to her. Denounce this research. Confirm that. Cole acted without your informed consent, and your transfer to Ilion will be reconsidered. Seralyth's face became unreadable. Reconsidered how? Your dignity will be preserved. Your royal residence restored. Your public record amended. And Ethan? Removed from Elora. One of the guards took my arm. I twisted free on instinct, not striking him, just forcing enough space to face Seralyth. Another guard locked a restraint around my wrist. Cold alloy snapped shut. Seralyth moved forward. 3 guards blocked her path. Do not touch him. Princess, the Chancellor said. This human has exploited your condition. The gold at her throat flared. You mean the condition your physicians used to erase my future? He has encouraged you to believe an interspecies union could restore your fertility. No, her voice cut through the chamber. Everyone stopped. He has done precisely the opposite. She looked at me through the line of armored shoulders. He told me I mattered if it changed nothing. The Chancellor's expression tightened. Then prove it. Denounce him. The guards pulled me toward the door. My restraints scraped against the metal edge of the console. I could have argued. I could have told them about V17, about the ancient adaptive pathway, about every simulation suggesting that Vaelorian medicine had defined impossibility too narrowly. But those facts would turn Seralyth into exactly what she feared becoming, a reproductive asset. So I reached backward with my restrained hand and hit the archive purge control. The holographic models vanished. The console chimed. Local comparative dataset deleted, the system announced. The high geneticist lunged toward it. Stop him. Too late. Every model derived from Seralyth's private samples disappeared from the terminal. The only surviving copy remained encrypted on my tablet, protected by her authorization. The Chancellor stared at me. You just destroyed royal genetic research. Her medical data. A guard pulled me harder. There is a difference. They marched me into the corridor. The temperature rose immediately, but the restraint around my wrist stayed ice cold. Behind me, I heard Seralyth call my name. I turned. She stood at the archive threshold, surrounded by officials beneath brutal white light. The Chancellor stepped into her path. One statement, he told her. Say Ethan Cole acted without your consent, and this ends tonight. Seralyth looked at the crownless reflection staring back from the polished corridor wall. Then she looked at me being dragged toward the elevator. Her mouth opened. For one terrible second, no sound came. The elevator doors parted behind me. Choose carefully, the Chancellor said. Seralyth's golden markings blazed so brightly, they painted the guard's armor amber. She stepped forward. I will, she said, but I will not choose your lie. They removed my restraints in the Hall of Continuity because Seralyth demanded to condemn me in public. At least, that was what the Chancellor believed. I stood beneath the same suspended gold displays that had erased her name days earlier, rubbing the cold marks the cuffs had left around my wrists. Hundreds of nobles filled the tiered chamber. Their ceremonial chains clicked softly whenever they shifted, and the air smelled of heated crystal and the sharp resin burned during royal judgments. Seralyth entered alone. No crown, no mantle, just a plain silver robe falling around her tall frame and those pale gold lines glowing beneath her pearl teal skin. The room went silent. Princess Seralyth Vael, the Chancellor announced. The Council offers restoration of your residence and dignity if you formally state that engineer Ethan Cole pursued prohibited compatibility research without your consent. A recording sphere floated toward her. Speak, and the human will be removed from Elera. Seralyth looked at me. I couldn't tell her what to do. That was the whole point. The Chancellor had finally built a cage I couldn't dismantle with an engineering tool. If she protected me, she would lose what remained of her place here. If she denounced me, she could stay. I gave her the smallest nod I could manage. Whatever you choose. Her gaze dropped briefly to my bare wrist where my Terran badge used to hang. Ethan Cole did not begin the research without my consent, she said. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Chancellor's jaw tightened. Consider your answer carefully. I have spent my life doing that. She walked toward the central dais. Gold light from the succession display moved across her silver lavender hair. You examined me when I was a child. You treated me when I was barely old enough to understand why physicians kept apologizing to my family. And when your machines finally declared that I could never produce an heir, you removed my name before the examination chamber had grown cold. The Chancellor stepped forward. This hearing concerns the human. Yes. Seralyth turned toward me. It does. She descended from the dais until only a few feet separated us. He found evidence that my biology may respond to his. He could have used it to become valuable to this court. Her amber eyes stayed on mine. Instead, he erased the evidence when I asked him to. The chamber became so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the recording sphere above us. He told you nothing? One noble asked. He protected my choice. Seralyth faced the council again. You offered me my rooms, my title, and your approval if I called that exploitation. The golden lines beneath her collarbones brightened. I decline. The Chancellor's voice dropped. Then you accept permanent removal from succession. Yes. That single word changed the room. The succession display responded automatically. Her faded royal designation appeared above us, waiting for confirmation. The Chancellor stared at her. You would surrender your claim for this human before you even know whether he can give you a child. Seralyth's head turned slowly. No, she walked back to me. That is why I am surrendering it. Her hand found mine in full view of the court. Cool fingers. Steady grip. If I stood beside him only because his biology might make me fertile, I would be doing exactly what you did to me. I felt every eye in the chamber settle on our joined hands. Seralyth, I said quietly, you don't owe me this. I know. Her inner pupils contracted slightly. That is what makes it mine. She looked up at me, and the question from the archive returned without needing to be spoken. Would Ethan Cole choose Seralyth Vael without knowing the answer? I closed my fingers around hers. Yes. Her breath caught softly. Nothing else moved. No scanner measured us. No genetic model appeared. I stepped beside her, not in front of her, and together we faced the council. The Chancellor touched the confirmation panel. Above us, Seralyth's succession claim disappeared permanently. 100 nobles watched a princess lose a throne. I watched her straighten as if something heavier had just been taken from her shoulders. Then Seralyth reached up, removed the last small crest of House Vael from her collar, and placed it on the floor between herself and the council. You called me worthless because I could not continue your bloodline, she said. Her hand returned to mine. This human treated me as valuable before he knew whether I could continue anything. The Chancellor stared at us. And what exactly are you declaring? Seralyth looked at me first. She waited. I nodded. Only then did she turn back toward the empire that had spent her entire life choosing for her. That if Ethan Cole still chooses me, she said, then I choose union with him, even if no child ever comes from it. The first plasma bolt struck the hall of continuity before Seralyth could release my hand. White-blue light exploded across the black crystal floor, followed by a concussion that knocked ceremonial displays dark and sent nobles scrambling behind the tiered benches. I caught Seralyth around the waist before she hit the floor, the air filled with hot metal and scorched resin. Somewhere above us, alarms began hammering in 3-note bursts. Stay down. I am taller than you, Ethan. Not relevant. A second bolt burned through the doorway we had been standing beside seconds earlier. That made it relevant. Seralyth grabbed my sleeve and pulled me behind the dais as armored figures entered from the eastern gallery. Their insignia belonged to the Pure Line Guard, the faction responsible for protecting Vaelorian bloodline law. They weren't aiming at the council. Their weapons tracked toward me. They want the human, Seralyth said. I noticed. The Chancellor shouted for security, but half the palace network had already gone dark. Whatever this was, it had been prepared before Seralyth chose me publicly. I crawled to the dais control panel, tore away its decorative crystal cover, and found the emergency power bus underneath. What are you doing? Changing the room. I crossed 2 contacts with the metal clasp from my sleeve. The succession hologram flashed alive at maximum intensity. Gold light flooded the chamber, blinding the attackers long enough for us to run. Seralyth moved first. I followed her through a service door behind the royal platform as plasma struck the wall inches from my shoulder, throwing heat across my neck. We ran through narrow maintenance corridors where exposed conduits vibrated overhead and cold recycled air smelled of dust. They cannot allow our union, Seralyth said between breaths. Because I'm human? Because if our compatibility is real, every law built around pure blood becomes questionable. There it was. Not a mystery. Not another hidden clue. The consequence of everything we already knew. Our choice had become dangerous because it could prove the Empire's definition of fertility had been wrong. We reached a junction. Seralyth stopped abruptly, one hand catching the wall. Seralyth, keep moving. She took another step and folded against me. I lowered her carefully to the floor. Her skin felt colder than usual. The golden lines along her throat flickered out of rhythm. Look at me. I am looking. You're terrible at following instructions. I learned from you. I pulled my wrist scanner from my pocket. It was the last Terran medical tool I still carried, designed for field exposure and basic xenobiological monitoring. I pressed it near her wrist. The display populated with her baseline markers from our research. Heart rhythm elevated. Oxygen stable. V17 activity high. Then another pulse appeared beneath the first. I stared at it. No. I repositioned the scanner. Same result. Seralyth watched my face. What? I ran the scan again. The corridor shook as another distant blast rolled through the palace. Dust drifted from the ceiling, tasting like metal on my tongue. The scanner chirped twice. 2 separate biological rhythms. One unmistakably hers. The second impossibly small. Ethan. I couldn't make the word come out. Her hand closed around my wrist and pulled the display toward her. The gold beneath her skin suddenly brightened. Is the device damaged? I don't know. That is not your usual answer. Because I don't know how this can be happening this soon. Her eyes moved from the screen to mine. How what can be happening? Another alarm sounded behind us. Footsteps echoed from the corridor we had escaped through. We had seconds. I slid one arm beneath hers and helped her stand. She resisted. Tell me. The scanner is reading a secondary metabolic rhythm. Meaning? I looked at her abdomen, then immediately back into her eyes. Meaning we need a real medical scanner before I say anything I can't take back. The footsteps grew louder. Seralyth pushed away from the wall. Whatever weakness had dropped her vanished beneath pure determination. Then get us to one. We ran. The nearest independent medical bay was 80 yards below us, beyond a service shaft whose lift had lost power. I forced open the manual hatch. Darkness waited beneath, lit only by thin red emergency strips. Can you climb? I asked. Seralyth looked down the shaft. Can you? Princess, I'm from Colorado. I do not know what that means. Neither do I right now. For the first time since the attack began, she almost smiled. We descended. 30 feet below, another impact shook the shaft. Seralyth's boot slipped. I caught her wrist with both hands, my shoulders slamming into the ladder. Pain flashed down my arm, but I held on. Her amber eyes locked onto mine through the red darkness. Do not let go. Wasn't planning on it. I pulled her back against the ladder. Together we reached the lower hatch. I kicked it open and helped her into the abandoned medical bay. Backup lights flickered awake. A diagnostic cradle stood against the far wall. Seralyth walked to it without waiting for me. She placed her palm on the activation plate. Scan me. I locked the door behind us as impacts echoed closer through the corridor. Then I turned toward the medical display. The cradle illuminated her body in soft violet light. One heartbeat appeared. Then, beneath it, a second signal began to pulse. The second heartbeat vanished the moment the palace lost power. The diagnostic cradle went black beneath Seralyth, and the medical bay filled with red emergency light. A deep impact rolled through the floor. Cabinets rattled. Somewhere behind the walls, ventilation turbines wound down until the only sounds left were Seralyth's breathing and fists striking the locked door outside. Ethan. I saw it. I crossed to the dead console and pulled open its maintenance panel. Hot plastic and ozone stung my nose. two independent metabolic rhythms. The second was too organized to be scanner noise. Seralyth sat upright. One hand settled against her abdomen without seeming to realize it. Say what you mean. I looked at her across the red darkness. I think you're pregnant. Her fingers stopped. The words had barely left my mouth when the emergency system spoke overhead. Life support failure. Medical sector oxygen reserve, 11 minutes. The pounding outside stopped. That worried me more. I opened the equipment cabinet and found an old Vaelorian circulatory stabilizer, the kind used to keep patients alive during power interruptions. Its indicator showed one functioning charge. Can it protect the child? Seralyth asked. Not herself. The child. Maybe. But it needs a live bioelectric source. Use mine. Your readings are already unstable. I dragged the unit beside the cradle. Its silver housing was cold and textured beneath my palms. The whole point is reducing the load on you. A faint mechanical click sounded at the door. Someone was overriding the lock. I found the auxiliary interface and stared at the connector. Vaelorian medical equipment could draw energy from a compatible circulatory field. Mine wasn't designed for it, but the archive had already established one inconvenient fact about us. Our biology could communicate. No, Seralyth said. I hadn't touched anything yet. That's impressive. I know your face now. That's unfortunate. Ethan. I stripped the insulation from the interface lead and connected it to my Terran wrist scanner. The device chirped a warning. Human circulatory profile? Unsupported. Yeah, we've heard that before. Seralyth climbed from the cradle and caught my wrist. Her skin was cool. What will it do to you? Best case? Make me feel terrible. Worst case? The door lock clicked again. I met her eyes. We don't have time for the brochure. She tightened her grip. No, Seralyth. You do not get to teach me choice and then decide yours is the only one that matters. That stopped my hand. Red light swept across her face every 2 seconds. The gold beneath her throat pulsed with it, almost matching the emergency lamps. You're right. I placed the connector in her palm. So choose. She stared at it. If we do nothing, the stabilizer dies with the power. Your metabolism keeps dropping, and whatever that second rhythm is loses support with you. Her eyes closed for 1 second. And if I connect you? We give both of you a chance. The door began to open. Seralyth pressed the connector into my wrist scanner. The stabilizer came alive. White light burst across the bay. Pain traveled up my arm. Not sharp, but crushing, like every heartbeat suddenly had weight. I dropped to one knee. Ethan, start it. She pulled me toward the cradle instead. Together, I braced one hand against its frame while she climbed back onto the platform. The machine linked our readings. Human pulse in blue, Vaelorian pulse in gold. Beneath hers, the tiny second rhythm returned. The stabilizer drew from me in waves. My vision narrowed around the edges. The air tasted metallic. Transfer stable, the machine announced. Maternal circulation improving. Seralyth stared at the display. Maternal. Her voice barely carried over the alarm. Then the second signal strengthened. One pulse. Another. Another. Her hand found mine where it gripped the cradle. Disconnect, she ordered. Not yet. Your heart rate is falling. Then it has room to be dramatic. Ethan, stop. The outer door finally opened. Armed figures appeared beyond the emergency lights. But Seralyth moved before they could cross the threshold. She reached for the medical broadcast control and slammed her palm against it. The stabilizer's readings transmitted into the palace emergency network. Every functioning screen in the royal complex received the same 3 signals. Mine, hers, and the impossible rhythm between them. The figures at the doorway froze. Seralyth looked at them, then at the display. You wanted proof that a human had contaminated your bloodline, she said. Her fingers closed around mine as the tiny pulse continued beneath her own. Now the entire palace can see what your laws said could never exist. The men who had come to kill me lowered their weapons when the third heartbeat filled every screen in the palace. It sounded impossibly small through the medical bay speakers, a quick electronic pulse beneath Seralyth's slower rhythm and my weakening one. Red emergency light swept across the armored figures in the doorway. Nobody crossed the threshold. Seralyth lay inside the diagnostic cradle with one hand gripping mine. Her pearl teal skin washed almost silver beneath the stabilizer's white glow. Disconnect him, she ordered. The machine refused. Maternal stabilization dependent on external circulatory support. Then use mine alone. Insufficient. I tasted copper when I swallowed. Seralyth. Her double-ringed eyes snapped toward me. Do not tell me you are fine. Wasn't going to. I forced my other hand toward the control panel. I was going to tell you to record everything. She stared at me. Then she understood. The palace already had proof of the pregnancy. What it didn't have was proof of why. Seralyth reached across the cradle and opened the broadcast channel wider. Archive access, she said. Royal authorization Seralyth Vael. The damaged system flickered. Authorization revoked. Her mouth tightened. Use my tablet. I pushed it toward her. The encrypted copy we had protected from the council still carried the ancient reproductive model, the modern comparison, and her authorization history. She connected it directly to the medical cradle. Gold and blue diagrams unfolded across every functioning display. The high geneticist appeared at the doorway behind the guards. He stopped when he saw V17 pulsing beside the fetal signal. That pathway is non-functional. Not non-functional, I said. My voice came out rough. Inactive under your compatibility model. Seralyth expanded the historical comparison herself. Generations of royal pairings narrowed into increasingly similar genetic lines. Beside them, the ancient adaptive pathway remained open. You selected for purity, she said, until our bodies could no longer find enough difference to activate what our ancestors possessed naturally. The geneticist stepped closer to the display. That cannot be concluded from one pregnancy. Correct, I said. So test the model. He looked at me. I pointed toward the old archive records. Not on her. On your existing anonymized data. For several seconds he didn't move. Then he crossed the room, pushed past the armed men, and connected his medical terminal to the surviving network. His fingers moved rapidly over the controls. Thousands of archived fertility cases populated the wall. Women and men classified sterile. Failed royal pairings. Dormant receptor readings dismissed because the standard model expected only Vaelorian to Vaelorian activation. The computer ran the comparison. The room filled with the hum of cooling fans and the sharp smell of overheated circuitry. Then numbers began changing. 12%. 29. 46. The geneticist's hand stopped. How many? Seralyth asked. He didn't answer. How many? Potentially millions. The words barely carried. One of the guards slowly lowered his weapon completely. The chancellor appeared behind him, his ceremonial robe torn at one shoulder from the attack. End the broadcast. Seralyth turned her head toward him. No, this data will destabilize the Empire. Then perhaps the Empire deserves to be destabilized. He stepped into the bay. You would overturn centuries of continuity law because of one hybrid conception? Seralyth's hand moved instinctively over her abdomen. No, because of every person you called defective when your definition was defective. The Chancellor reached for the transmission control. The high geneticist blocked him. That was the moment the room changed. Not when the child appeared on the scanner. Not when the weapons lowered. When the man who had pronounced Seralyth barren placed himself between her evidence and the institution that had taught him to ignore it. The medical record must stand, he said. Across the palace network, more terminals joined the broadcast. Physicians, genetic centers, provincial hospitals. The data escaped the palace faster than anyone could contain it. My vision blurred. The stabilizer alarmed. Seralyth immediately reached for me. Ethan, still here. External donor approaching critical threshold, the machine warned. Disconnect recommended. Do it, she said. This time the cradle obeyed. The connector released from my wrist, and I nearly hit the floor. Seralyth caught my shoulder from the cradle as two medics rushed forward. Behind them, the Chancellor stood surrounded by guards who no longer seemed certain whose orders mattered. The high geneticist looked at Seralyth, then lowered himself to one knee. Others followed, not all at once. One guard, then a physician, then another council official visible on a distant screen. Seralyth watched them with the same stillness she had shown when they erased her name. Do not kneel because I am carrying an heir, she said. Slowly, the geneticist raised his head. Then why, princess? Seralyth looked toward me as the medics steadied me beside her. Her fingers found mine again. Kneel, she said, if you understand that no one should ever have needed one. 7 months later, my daughter wrapped 5 tiny fingers around mine beneath the same golden light that had once erased her mother's name. The nursery overlooked Ellora's eastern spaceport. where Terran shuttles now landed beside Vaelorian medical transports instead of diplomatic escorts. Morning light poured through the crystal window and warmed the polished floor beneath my feet. Behind me, a cradle emitted a soft rhythmic hum. Seralyth stood beside it, barefoot, wearing a simple silver robe with no royal crest. Our daughter slept against her chest. Her skin was lighter than Seralyth's, almost human at first glance, but pale gold lines traced her tiny collarbones and pulsed gently with every heartbeat. I touched one glowing line with the back of my finger. Warm. Real. Seralyth watched me. You have checked her breathing. 17 times. 16. Ethan. 17. The amber light beneath Seralyth's throat brightened. I had learned that glow well enough to hear the smile before I saw it. Outside the window, another transport descended toward the medical district. Its hull carried a symbol that hadn't existed when Seralyth and I met. Two open circles intersecting around a single star. The emblem of the Adaptive Reproductive Initiative. After the Palace broadcast, independent genetic centers across the Empire repeated our model. The results were impossible to bury. Millions of Vaelorians classified as infertile carried dormant adaptive pathways. Some responded to genetically diverse Vaelorian partners. Others showed compatibility with species no continuity physician had ever considered. Not everyone could conceive. No one promised that. That mattered. The reform was never allowed to become another machine deciding who possessed value. The pure blood continuity laws were repealed 4 months before our daughter was born. The Sanctuary of Ilion closed its compulsory residence program. People once removed from marriages, inheritance, and public life because of fertility classifications received their legal status back. Seralyth had been offered hers too. The council restored her succession claim. She declined it. I had been there when they brought the crown. She hadn't even touched it. You took my worth because I could not produce an heir, she had told them. You will not return it because I did. Instead, she accepted authority over the new medical charter on one condition. Reproductive status could never again determine legal personhood, marriage rights, or civic dignity. I got my Terran badge back. I kept it in a drawer. Seralyth said this was disrespectful to interstellar diplomacy. I told her the drawer was very prestigious. Our daughter stirred. A tiny sound escaped her, somewhere between a sigh and the crystalline chirp Vaelorian infants made in their sleep. Seralyth adjusted the blanket around her. The fabric was Terran cotton, soft and blue, bordered with traditional Vaelorian gold thread. 2 worlds stitched together without either disappearing. They are calling. Her the child who saved the bloodline, Seralyth said. I looked through the glass at the city below. Couples were entering the new clinic across the plaza. Vaelorian. Human. Mixed species. Some would leave with possibilities they had never been offered. Some would leave with the same answer they had always feared. But none would leave branded defective. She didn't save it, I said. Neither did you. Seralyth raised one eyebrow. Careful, human. I stepped closer. You changed it before she existed. Her gaze shifted to me. How? You chose something your empire never gave you. She looked down at our daughter. You? Yourself. For a moment, the only sound was the cradle's quiet hum. Seralyth touched her forehead to mine. Her skin was cool, just as it had been the first time our hands met over a medical console. They will say you proved I was never barren. They'll be wrong. She pulled back slightly. Explain. You were infertile under the system they built. Our union changed that. I touched our daughter's tiny hand. But whether it had changed or not, you would still have been Seralyth. Her eyes stayed on mine. And you would still have chosen me? I already did. The baby opened her eyes. Amber, like her mother's, but with a single human iris instead of 2 rings. Seralyth made a sound so quiet I almost missed it. Then our daughter grabbed my finger and refused to let go. Outside, a Terran ship rose through the pale Illyran sky while a Vaelorian vessel climbed beside it, their engines leaving 2 white trails that slowly crossed in the sunlight. Seralyth leaned against my shoulder. No crown. No judgment chamber. No machine announcing what she could never become. Just her breathing, our daughter's glowing heartbeat, and my hand held between theirs. Our union had given an empire the child it believed impossible. But what changed everything was choosing each other before we knew she would ever exist.